For the next 25 years, I understand that the global stage will essentially house four very important developments. One of them is the consolidation and expansion of global collaboration networks. The fact that companies will be able to design in one nation, produce in another nation, and have its logistics and transportations performed by other partners. The second characteristic, and one that I have to attach to sort of sadly, but I think it's unfolding before our eyes, is the rebirth of geopolitics. Geopolitics have become again enormously important for international economic relations. The third characteristic of this global scenario that is flourishing before our eyes for this next quarter century is the rise of a new age of talent. The notion that knowledge economies, high value-added goods, intangible products will demand more and more hours of schooling and training and practice. And therefore, those nations that have placed their bets upon only relying on agricultural and mineral commodities as the backbone of their economies have less of a chance to succeed. And the fourth characteristic of this global scenario that brings us here today is the rise of China.
It's unmistakable that China's rise has been very dramatic and to many people also very unexpected. And while there have been a lot of people throughout the years basically surmising that China will collapse or that China's growth will underperform, so far it's showed very exceptional resiliency and has defied all these predictions. And so one of the main important aspects of China is that they have embraced openness to the world in order to help them grow. So this is clearly important in China's overall character and strategy of growth. Another aspect I want to point out is China's openness to experimentation. So China basically had an economy that was completely 100% state-owned, right? 40 years ago, it was communist and there was no private industry whatsoever. Now, they had to figure out how to integrate themselves into the current global order that was more or less led by the US, where private industry played a role. And so they had to figure out how to move from their current state to a different state when they had no price signals, no real market economy. Clearly they saw that what happened with the Soviet Union didn't work. Just one large step into it caused the collapse there. So China realized that they had to do things step by step and just do things trial and error. And so you might have heard the term special economic zones. To make an analogy, scientists often would have hypotheses about whether something would work. But before they would say that this is absolutely true, they would test it out in the laboratory and see the results. Well, that's exactly how China approached their economic policies. They basically would have a theory of how an economic policy ought to work, but they weren't sure. So they would try it out in different cities and provinces first, see what the results are, and then decide whether they expand it or change the policy altogether. So then again here, I think is another pillar of what helped China get out of its state as a poor country and on its way, well, now to the second largest economy in the world and by many measures approaching the largest economy. Thirdly, I would say that China is not afraid of competition. Most countries around the world, whether it's in Latin America or especially in Europe now and sort of the Club Mediterranean countries, you see that a lot of the stagnation had come because There was a lot of rules and regulations that happened over the years that actually had a way of blocking out competition. Because when you have so many rules and regulations, it becomes nearly impossible for an entrepreneur who has a great idea to then hire all the lawyers, these very expensive lawyers, to come up with the documents and the legal plans to get them started, to have the right amount of capital to get started, to hire all the accountants to make sure all their books are correct. This makes it extremely hard for new entrants to come in. And finally, I would say that they learn a lot from mistakes of others and from themselves. They are avid students of history. And so I would say that these are things to contemplate about how Brazil may want to think about reforms. I think that these are questions that deserve to be asked and deserve answers.